Hello friends, Fujosevich here. Welcome to some very early Eternal open beta. Now Eternal is a new free-to-play digital card game being brought to us by Direwolf Alpha. And in this video I'm going to be highlighting and showcasing some of the features of the game, how the game works in terms of card collection, crafting cards, and majority of the time I'm going to be drawing comparisons with Hearthstone, because if you're into these sort of digital card games, you understand that Hearthstone's kind of the biggest player in the scene, and so making those sorts of comparisons are going to make the most sense, I think. So this is the loading screen when you first get into Eternal, but when you first boot up the game, now that it is in open beta, even if you've played in the closed beta like I did, you have to go through the campaign, which I can't go into right now because I've already completed it. But it's a really good way that the game introduces some of the mechanics of attacking, defending, spells, fast spells, weapons, things like that, relic weapons, and I'll talk about a lot of these things. I will show some gameplay later on. So first thing that we want to look at is our card collection here at the top, and these are a bunch of decks that I already have. There are 5 different classes or colors, which definitely draws more on the idea of Magic the Gathering. Here we have Fire, Time, Justice, Primal, and Shadow. Very similar. And then we also have multi-faction, which can be thought of being neutral, but you can have decks that have multiple factions in one deck, and so these are some of the cards that'll work there. And again, there's also increasing rarities, as we're used to with something like Hearthstone. There's rare, there's common, uncommon, rare, legendary, and epic. Epic and legendary. Oops, wrong order there, but that's alright. I'm sure you know what I mean. And it works on a similar crafting system as Hearthstone does as well. You have to create a card for significantly more than you end up destroying it for. One of the things you'll also see here is the decks consist of 50 cards. And not only that, but then we'll have to talk about some of our resources. And that's referred to in this game as influence, as opposed to in Hearthstone we talk about mana. But we'll talk about that a little bit more once we get into an actual game. In terms of crafting, what we're using for crafting is not unsimilar to Hearthstone. Here they're called shift stones, and again they give us a very easy to use destroying extra system, which is very nice. And again, you can get shift stones from an Eternal from opening packs here at the top. I have none to show you, I'm sorry. Or from disenchanting your cards, or destroying your extras as they're referred to here. So with that in mind, I want to hop into a game to actually showcase some of the actual mechanics of the game. But first, so I've already mentioned the campaign. There's also Gauntlet, which is what we're going to do. So Gauntlet, what you do here is you bring in one of your own decks and you battle up to 7 AI decks, where you're trying to reach 7 wins in a single run. And as you increase your wins, you get better rewards. There is one theory floating out there that so it's a race to 7 wins. You're trying to get to 7 wins, but if you drop out after your 6th, you don't increase in difficulty. And that some people are debating that might be actually a better way to be building your deck up. The next game mode that they have in Eternal is the Forge. And the Forge is very similar to Gauntlet, where you're going up against AI opponents. However, in the Forge, what you're doing is you're creating a deck from 25 cards that you pick at random, similar to Hearthstone's Arena. However, in this case, in the Forge, you get to keep all of the cards that you pick, which is very useful early on if you decide you want to be playing a certain type of deck, a certain color, certain combination, because the Forge consists of 2 faction decks, so you can just pick cards from those factions and be keeping them at the end of it, regardless of how well you do. And again, the Forge works a similar way as the Gauntlet, where the farther you go, the better rewards you get. And again, you do progress and you can increase your opponents, your AI's decks that you're playing against, and then the seasons reset in Gauntlet and Forge against these AI every time they release major sets. There is also ranked play, which people are going to be very familiar with that concept from Hearthstone, and there's also a draft where you go out drafting decks from 4 packs, similar to what you would expect from the Hearthstone Arena. So I'm going to get into a Gauntlet run right now. Gauntlet is free to run, and I'm going to bring my Hand of Justice deck, which I thought I changed the name. I don't think that this is necessarily a really optimal deck, but what I'm going to be using What I'm going to be doing here is using this deck to kind of highlight some of the in-game mechanics. So I'm going to go, first thing actually, before I do anything, is I do need to show here the fact that the mulligan or the redrawing system is slightly different from Hearthstone. In Hearthstone you get to pick specifically which cards you want to keep and which cards you want to get rid of. Here you have to redraw your entire hand. And one of the other things you'll see are these time sigils, or seed of progress here. And these are actually our resources, so I'm going to keep all these cards and keep talking about this. So our sigils are our resources. In Hearthstone, we get 1 mana per turn basically, except for druids who can ramp, and maybe warlocks who can kind of destroy mana crystals, but that's usually not used. No one likes those. So in Eternal, much like in Magic the Gathering, you need to have your resources in your hand and actually play them each turn. In Eternal, you're only allowed to play 1 resource card per turn. So this is a combo card. So this is going to give us 1 power, but then also 1 influence of both time and justice. And then I'm going to, because I have that resource this turn, I'm going to play this creature, or this minion. This is a 1/1. This is a very relatively good. This is one of the actual ramp style cards in Eternal. And what this is what it does is increase my maximum power. So I have 2 power now, 1 from the card that I played last turn, and 1 from this creature. So what I'm going to do this turn is play my next time sigil. So now I'll have 3 power, and 2 influence in time, and 1 in justice. And what you'll see here, let's take an example of the Temple Scribe here that we have in our hand. We can see at the top left with the big 2 that I need 2 total power out of the 3 that I have, but I also need 2 time influence. So suppose that this actually said that I needed 2 justice influence, I would not be able to play this because I only have 1 right now. But because I do have the influence, I'm going to go ahead and play this, and this card lets me draw another card, which is very good. And then I'm going to go ahead and attack, and we'll get into the attacks as more minions get played, but as you can see, it's a little bit different than Hearthstone as well. So in order to attack, you need to click on a unit that's green, that's not exhausted, and we'll talk about exhaustion in a second, and then you need to press attack. And if there were minions on my opponent's board, they would then determine who's defending, and I'll show that in a second. But now that my minion has attacked, they're now exhausted and not able to play this coming turn. Or not able to defend this coming turn. They're still out there. So now on my turn again, I want to play my sigil first. And because I'm out of sigils this turn, what I want to do is I want to use Roland's Favor. So he gets gain 2 armor, which is, at this point in the game, I'm expecting to be a non-factor. But it draws me another sigil, which is very important. Because I want to be able to get as many power out as early as I can. And then I'll play a nice 2 mana 3/2 Argent Soldier. And once again, I'll attack with both of my cards. And one of the other differences here between Eternal and Hearthstone is that you're only allowed to have 1 attack turn. So I use my attack turn, and now I'm done for attacking. So even if Argent Port Soldier, who again has, for Magic the Gathering, I always refer to it as Summoning Sickness, even in Hearthstone, that's what I call it. But Argent Port Soldier was not able to attack because I just summoned him, unless he had the charge text, which does exist in Eternal as well. So now my opponent's played a 2/3 minion that has endurance. Now endurance is interesting because you saw how my minions, after they attacked, they got kind of blacked out, their card art got blacked out, and that's really important because then they would not be able to defend the next turn. However, endurance lets you be ready on each turn, so you're able to attack and then defend again also. Now what we're going to do to get around this though, however, is we have another Justice Sigil. We're then going to play a Mithril Mace. Now Mithril Mace gets equipped on your hero, and heroes can actually direct their attacks. Now the way that the weapons work, I'm going to go ahead and attack with all of my minions because there's really no need not to. The interesting way that the weapons get used in Eternal is that I have an attack here, much like you're used to in Hearthstone with 3, but then I have the life of the weapon, which gets reduced as I use the weapon. So if I were to attack something that only deals 1 damage to me, that 4 now, this 4 here, that I'm showing you with my mouse, gets reduced to 3, and I can use that 3 attack multiple times, which is kind of interesting, that's how they've decided to use this mechanic. So I have a relatively, I think this is a pretty good card, the Praxis Displacer. It's a 4 mana or 4 power 3/2, which is kind of weaker on stats, but it basically has the same ability as you're used to in Hearthstone as sap. So I would be able to sap this minion and then push in a bit of damage. I don't think that's really useful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a 5 power 3/3 flying minion. And then I'm going to attack down here. And we'll attack here. And I just realized that was actually... That's an okay play because my opponent decided to defend. And I actually did that in the wrong order. I shouldn't have attacked there first. So one of the other things that we have here in this game in Eternal that we don't see in Hearthstone is the flying minions. And flying minions can only be blocked by other flying minions. Which is then important because if your opponent has flying minions and you don't have any to block, that becomes a really big problem for you, or at least can become a very big problem for you. There's another interesting word text here that this Loyal Watchwing has, is Warcry. And Warcry, there are some decks actually that really revolve around the Warcry mechanism or mechanic. And what the Warcry mechanic does is that whenever this minion attacks, doesn't have to do damage, you can get killed. But this minion then buffs the top unit or weapon in your deck. So... actually, I'll stop this first. What are we going to do? We're going to play our big... Oh, we can't play that yet. So we're going to play our 2/3. We have the same 2/3. We're going to use my weapon to remove my opponent's minion, much like we do in Hearthstone. We want to use our face resources. So we saw as this Warcry minion attacked, it then buffed something in my deck. And I don't know what that is necessarily, but once I draw it, I will know that was the card that was buffed. So this is sort of a very snowball-y type of mechanic here. And this is a really good defensive card that I just got. And what did my opponent play? Spire Chaplain? Okay, so this is a Warcry basically that will draw a Justice Sigil. And I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to use the last charge of my weapon and go ahead and take that one out. And then I attack with all my minions here again. And I'm just going to go ahead and end my turn. So Scorpion Wasp is a really, really great defensive card, which I don't think we're going to get to see in action this game, because I feel like we're going to end up winning before it happens. But maybe in the next game we'll get to see it. So there's a really interesting card text here called Ambush, where you're able to play this on your defending turn. If you have the resources saved up. So I used all my resources, I wouldn't be able to use this card. But hopefully we'll get to see a game, or an instance next game where this will happen. And this is just going to be a win. And now this is a weapon that you equip on one of your minions, basically acting as a buff. They have, although weapons get removed slightly differently in Eternal. And so that's just a really quick win here. And I think that's going to be all for this first video. I'm going to keep going and probably keep talking through some of the basic mechanics of the game as they relate to and draw comparisons and contrasts with Hearthstone. If you guys are enjoying this and you want to be seeing more, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm definitely going to be getting into some ranked, and I'm going to be building my collection. So thanks for hanging out with me, everyone. Feel free to subscribe if you want to get more updates when I'm posting these, and I'll see you next time.